this is the entire reason why we do our branding, is just to create this familiarity and to eventually get to, these 20 views. And this might take 6 months, it might take 8 months. But what we're really doing is just trying to make sure that over time we are in front of people enough that we do become memorable and they don't really have a choice but to remember us. Today, we will be going over what is called the mere exposure effect. And this is something that pretty much directly ties into the why we do branding in the first place, is just to build recognition and frequency. But these principles apply really with everything. So the core definition is the mere exposure effect is a psychological phenomenon by which people tend to develop a preference for things or people that are more familiar to them than others. Repeated exposure increases familiarity. And that is something you have heard us say a billion times if you've ever met with Ben or I or Bill. This principle and this effect is why branding works and why marketing works.
So a good example of this is just like if you're at a new restaurant, if there's menu items you're not familiar with, you may be less likely to order them. So obviously that's relatable for everyone. Familiarity breeds confidence, and the same thing is going to apply to social media and branding yourself.
So again, the same principle applies to branding. Simply put, we like, which is familiar to us. Driving through your hometown, going back home, where everything is, it feels comfortable. Like we said, menu items, anything like that. And then again, a lot of times we have people that we watch on social media pretty frequently. And the more you watch them, the more you kind of go out of your way to watch their content. So it applies to literally everything in life.
And this is something that they've actually done a fair bit of research on. In the 60s, a series of Robert Zajonk's, his laboratory experiments demonstrated that simply exposing people to familiar stimulus led them to rate it more positively than others. Simple stimuli that had not been presented before. First, he looked at language and the frequency of words used, and overall positive words were used more than their negative counterparts. So yeah, in a word, things that you see a lot, things that you starts to grow a familiarity with, it's just good for branding.
Yeah, I mean, I know personally speaking, if I listen to a podcast a lot, I end up kind of taking that person's word as gospel. I don't know if we have any sports fans, but I listen to the Bill Simmons podcast, and I kind of consider what he says to be the absolute truth. And that's just because I've listened to him a billion times. And what you'll do is you'll start to hear advertisements that they put in this. And after you hear it for the 1,000th time, you're like, okay, maybe I do want some Brooklinen sheets, or maybe it is time to get a composter for my kitchen countertop. That sounds good. And it's something I would have ever thought to look into buying, but because I've heard it so many times, it's coming from somebody that I genuinely trust, just because I've heard what they've had to say a billion times at this point, I'm a lot more likely to want to buy one of those products. So this kind of all ties into it's like one of the 10 commandments of marketing is called the rule of 7. And so basically what this says is that 7 is a number of times that somebody marketing should look to hit somebody so that they will end up buying their product. According to this, it takes 7 times for somebody to become familiar enough with you that you feel okay purchasing their product.
And does it still apply? Yes, it does. But always a good rule of thumb, it's going to take 5 views to read it, up to 10 views to become memorable, and up to 20 views to become a conversation. Obviously, your goal is to just stay in front of people as much as possible. That's going to be more powerful than a lot of different marketing strategies. Just making sure that people see you and feel like they know you.
Absolutely. And this is kind of, we get some pushback sometimes of people saying, well, I want to do lead gen. I want to do kind of direct to consumer stuff. And really, the branding side of things really pays off long term. So once we're hitting people for lead gen, usually those people are seeing you for the first time. Luckily with us, you've got those great audiences that we've built, but nobody likes to hear a right hook over and over and over again. And so what we're really trying to do, and how this comes back to content, is we're trying to make you familiar. And there's a few ways we can do that. Educational content, you'll hear us talk about all the time. And that is a really, really great way to become memorable. Up to 10 views to become memorable. It might not take that long if you've got good content and if you're putting out really great educational content, because obviously we like better content. We remember better content. We like better songs. We remember better songs. It's all sort of the same principle. If you ever read a book called Hitmakers, they talk about this kind of stuff a lot. But yeah, up to 20 to become a conversion. And that is another thing. This does take time. We don't want to hit people 3 or 10 times in a single month. We want to hit them about 3 times in a month, but it takes time. And what does happen too is there is a bell curve. If people see you too much, then they start to associate maybe a little more negative of a feeling. So we've got to stay in that sweet spot and eventually get to that 20, but it does not happen overnight. And that is it for that. If you can take away anything from this, this is the entire reason why we do our branding, is just to create this familiarity and to eventually get to, these 20 views. And this might take 6 months, it might take 8 months. But what we're really doing is just trying to make sure that over time we're in front of people enough that we do become memorable and they don't really have a choice but to remember us. There is something we want to leave you with, and that is this super cool tool. So this is a tool that Facebook gave us. And Ben, I'll kind of let you talk a little bit about what this is.
Yeah. So one thing for our tip that we wanted to focus on was seasonal content. We just recently heard from our Meta rep, this is straight from the horse's mouth, that seasonal content is a really easy way to get great engagement. People tend to go for things that are, again, familiar. Everyone is familiar with holidays. Posts related to things that you can already and easily relate to with people that you know, like Christmas posts, giveaways, Easter. It applies for almost everything. So what we have here, Facebook will actually give you suggestions on seasonal content if you pick certain dates. So you can get campaign ideas, you pick your dates, and they will give you examples of what is going to be a good matchup for that season or holiday. And it can even be small things, Earth Day, things like that. It doesn't have to be Christmas, but again, anything that you can do to take advantage of something that most people around the US already know about, it's going to perform better.
Absolutely. Another thing is when you're looking at these inspiration for new content, please do not ever feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. If you go in here and see something that you like, switch it up a little bit, but don't totally reinvent it. You don't have to. Let's use what works. So if we come in here, today everything green is 10% off. That's great. That's any time of the year. But let's just say Valentine's Day is about to come up. So maybe I want to do something that is more based around Valentine's Day. And I do professional services. Gifts that glimmer. That's great. Sure. Really any of this. And if it doesn't directly apply to your business, I know a lot of you are realtors and in the mortgage business, you can figure out a way to, kind of mold these things to whatever you're selling. This is a really, really great place to come get some inspiration so you can look at data insights. This is super cool. So yeah, mixed format campaigns. So if you're posting a lot of video, a lot of static, they do want you to kind of mix it up. We always say video is king. It's a great place to come actually see what some of the numbers are behind it. Definitely look at these campaign ideas. Facebook, they said clients need to do seasonal posting because it works significantly better. Like Ben said, straight from the horse's mouth, it's definitely something you should be doing.